Press that button. So they don't make us find C anymore. We have to find A, B, and D. But if there is a C is the horizontal phase shift. So it's if the original graph of cosine sine has been moved at all. If it's been moved at all, there's a to the right or the left, there's a horizontal phase shift. We just have to find it. That's the hardest thing to find. They don't have it anymore. If there's a horizontal phase shift, they have to give it to us. So that if there was a horizontal phase shift on this equation, let's say, then they would have to go y equals a sine b x plus 7 plus d. They'd have to fill in that number for you. So that's great. You don't ever have to find it. They have to give it to you if there is one. Okay? Which is fantastic because it's actually it's harder than finding A, B, and D combined. Okay? Now A, we're going to find A first for number 1, number 2, number 3. We're going to find A first. Then we're going to find D. Then we're going to find C. Okay? Or B. C we don't have to find, remember? Okay. A, what the heck is A? Don't write really large. You're going to have to do A, D, and B in beside, so don't write really large. You find yourself some whiteout or something. Write really squishy over here. I don't know. So A, what we're going to do today is just graphs. I used to do graphs and equations commingled. Then no one understood graphs or equations very well. It was like a mess. So we're just looking at graphs, and we're having a graph, and we're coming up from information from the graph, the equation, and what other things about it. Okay? A represents the amplitude. I guess we should say the absolute value of A represents the amplitude. Because if your A value is negative, when you take it out of an equation, which we're going to do tomorrow, it's your amplitude is always positive. Your amplitude is the distance. It's the distance from the midline to the max and the midline to the min. The other way of looking at it is it's half the distance from the min to the max. So if I found out that from max to min it was a distance of 10, the amplitude would be 5. Okay? Flip to the back portion where you have notes. You're going to write back there, amplitude is always positive. At the notes part at the very back, you're going to write, amplitude is always positive. So if it was a multiple choice answer on your diploma and they asked you for the amplitude and there was one that was negative, you cross it off instantly because amplitude is a distance and distance is always positive. Right? Displacement can be negative. We're not dealing with displacement. We're dealing with a distance. So it has to always be positive. From a graph, amplitude can be found two ways. So you need to know both ways? Absolutely not. You pick whichever way you find easier and stick with it. Okay? And honestly, no one sticks to the same one. Some people choose one way and some people choose the other. So I give both options now. Option is the one that I show you first that you pick, just so you know. Which one do I want to show first? Okay, one way. A formula. What's the problem with a formula? You have to memorize it and it looks very awfully close to the D formula and then you forget which one's which. We're trying to find half the distance, right, from the total distance between the two max and mins. So what we do is we do amplitude equals the absolute value of max minus min divided by 2. Absolute value is important because our amplitude is always positive. And if our max and our min are both below the x-axis, we're going to get a value that's negative, right? And the absolute value will change that to positive and give us a positive amplitude. Okay? So that's why the signs are important. Okay? Second method, find the total distance from min to max, or from max to min. It doesn't matter if you go from top to bottom, bottom to top. Just find the total distance between the two from min to max and divide by 2. Once you're done that, we're going to go back to the first page. So you try and find the amplitude of the first one, whichever method you chose to think you'd like better. Use pencil because you really don't know. You're just kind of hoping you know. Amplitude. We could do it the two ways. I'm going to do the formula first. So this is the first way we could do it. If you're like, I don't need that formula, then don't write it. I don't really care. As long as you get the right answer. So amplitude is max. Max is 3 minus a min, negative 3. Because the max is at 3. It's the highest I go. The min is at negative 3. It's the lowest I go, right? So minus and minus 3 divided by 2. So we actually get the absolute value of 6 divided by 2, which is 3. Or method 2, the amplitude is take the total distance from min to max. So count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'd have to travel 6 blocks to get from the minimum to the maximum, correct? And then I just have to do what? Divide by 2. So total divided by 2. So it's 6 divided by 2, which is 3. Whichever way you like, you do. As long as you get the right answer, I don't care, right? So do 2 and 3, please. So this one, the amplitude, we can do the formula. Absolute value of max, which is 6, minus min, which is negative 2, divided by 2, which is 8, divided by 2, which is 4. Or I can do total divided by 2. The total is 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, 4 blocks, 5 blocks, 6 blocks, 7 blocks, 8 blocks. What in the what was that? 8 divided by 2, which is 4. The bottom one is a little trickier. Remember, we have to go from max to min. They would have to specify more about this to actually tell you exactly where the minimum is. So often they'll give you a graph like this, and then they'll say the minimum is at 9 and negative 3. They'll have to specify that, right? Because this graph could go way lower down here. Maybe this isn't the middle kind of thing. However, these do cross both here, so this would give you half of it. But on a 30-2 diploma, I can't see them being that hard on you. They might give you this and they give you a minimum. Anyways, this graph, 6, 7, 8, 9, goes down to negative 3. So our amplitude is going to be 6 divided by 2, which is 3. Okay? Flip over. There's 4 graphs for you. All right. So this one, your amplitude is going to be 0.8 minus a minus 0.8 divided by 2, which is 1.6 divided by 2, which is 0.8. Or you could say, hey, 0.8 to 0.8 is 1.6 divided by 2 is 0.8. Same answer. This amplitude is going to be negative 4 to 4. How much is that a distance of? 8. Divided by 2 is 4. 6, we're going from negative 5 to 5, which is an amplitude of 10 divided by 2, which is 5. And then this one is going to be from negative 6 to 6. How far is it from negative 6 to 6? 12 divided by 2 is 6. Or you could go amplitude equals the absolute value of 6 minus a minus 6 divided by 2, which is 12. What are you talking about? Okay, flip back to the front. Oh, flip back to the notes section. Sorry, notes section. Okay, next thing we're going to look at, we're at the notes section, is midline. It's called the midline. Or the median value. So, the midline or the median value. If I were to look at any type of sinusoidal graph, let's say it looks like this. Something like that. The midline, or median line, is the line that cuts the graph in half horizontally. Okay? It's the line that cuts the graph in half horizontally. So it is always an x equals number. It's always x equals number. Oh, x equals, sorry, it's always y equals number. It's a horizontal. Horizontal equations are always y equals. So if I drew it, it would be like a, let's say that line. It cuts the graph in half up and down. Imagine that that's down the middle because it's not the greatest horizontal line. What you're looking for is a y equals line that cuts the graph in half. Yeah. Now, the catch on this is that the amplitude up and the amplitude down will be the same. The midline cuts the graph in half, right? What's the amplitude? It's half the distance, correct? So if I count my amplitude down or I count my amplitude up, I'll get to the midline. So there's two ways I can solve this. There's two ways. So to find the midline from a graph. Now the midline can be positive or negative, correct? If the graph is mainly above, it's going to be a positive midline. But if your entire graph was down here, like this, your midline is going to be at like y equals -5 or something, okay? So your amplitude always has to be positive, but your midline doesn't have to. This one could be y equals 3, this could be y equals -5, right? So it's just the horizontal equation that cuts that graph in half. There's two ways we can do it. One is the formula. This is why the formula is a little bit harder though, because it's very similar to the other one. We're finding the average line, correct? We're finding the average between a max and a min. How do we find the average between two tests? Take the two tests, add them up, and divide by 2. We're trying to find the average between the max and the min, correct? We're trying to find the halfway. So we're just going to go, to get the d value, we're going to go max plus min divided by 2. You could even go min plus max divided by 2. Because it doesn't matter if we were finding the average of two tests, it wouldn't matter if I did this one plus this one divided by 2, or this one plus this one divided by 2. I'd still get the same average, correct? So you could do that. Or amplitude is max minus min divided by 2 in absolute value signs. D is max plus min divided by 2. Yeah. Now, the other way you can do it is you could find your amplitude and count up from the min or down from the max. To the midline. Once again, are you going to have to know both methods? No. You use whichever is one that you understand. This is to get the D of the formula. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Is your Y. Yep. Okay, flip back to the first page when you have that written. First page. Now we're going to find D of those graphs. And then we're going to find B of those graphs. And then we'll have the equation. Or we can answer any question about a graph. Because a graph, they could literally just say, what's the equation of this graph? Then you'd have to know A, B, and D. Or they could say, what's the amplitude of this graph? And you literally just have to find the amplitude. Or what's the midline of this graph? And you have to find the D. Or what's the period of this graph? And you have to calculate it from the graph. Or what's the B value? And you have to find it. So either way, we have to be able to still find A, B, or D to answer all those questions. So go back to this one. My D value. So for my D, I could go max 3 plus min negative 3 divided by 2 and get 0. So I have a midline at 0. How do I know I'm right? It should be in the middle. I should have the same distance going up and the same distance going down, which is also my what? What's the distance from middle up and middle down? Amplitude. So from here up, it's a distance of 3. From here down, it's a distance of 3. So what's my amplitude? 3. So how could I find my D value if I didn't want to use the formula? I could go from my max, count down 3, and I get to 0. Go from my min, count up 3, and I get to 0. And they both meet at the D. Okay? Because your amplitude is half the distance. So for this one, once I find my amplitude is 4, I could count down 4, gets me to 2. I could count up 4, it gets me to 2. And I know my D value is Y equals 2, right? D would equal 2, or the equation, the midline would be Y equals 2. Or I could go max plus min divided by 2, which is 4 over 2, which is 2. Works just as well, right? Same thing. Some people say, do they give me the formula? They give you 2 formulas. One is y equals a sine bx plus c plus d, and the other one is period equals 2 pi over b. Those are the 2 formulas they give you. That formula sheet is the diploma formula sheet. So if it's not on there, they don't give it to you. Okay? What's that? I don't know what you're saying. Comprende? Por favor? Okay, so D equals 3 plus negative 3 divided by 2, which is 0 divided by 2, which is 0. Or I could say, hey, I'm going to count down 3. I'm going to count up 3. And they meet at the midline, which is y equals 0. Now, if they say this, if they say, what's the midline? Midline has the word line in it. A line is an equation. So the midline is y equals 0. The median value is a value. The median value, you can just say, is 0. So if it's midline, you need y equals 0. If it's a median value, you can just use 0. Difference between midline and a value. Flip over to the next page, and I want you to find the D. So this one, it's going to be 0.8 plus negative 0.8 divided by 2, which is 0 divided by 2, which is 0. Or you can say, hey, 0.8 down, 0.8 up, they meet at y equals 0. This one's going to be at 0 as well. And this one's at 0. Is it always at 0? No. These ones, just except for the one, they were all symmetrical about, so same amount above as below, right? The x-axis, so that's why they were at y equals 0. But this whole graph could be completely up here, and then it's not going to be y equals 0. Okay, don't go home thinking, oh, I thought it was y equals 0, even though one example wasn't. Okay? The hardest part to find for you guys is going to be the b value, because you have to find the period, and there's no set way that always works forever to find the period. Pay attention. I don't want to lose you. Go to the back notes section. So the period, the period of the graph, the period helps you find the b value. This is why this one is harder to do, because if you don't have the period, you can't calculate the b value. You can't, if you don't know how to find the period, you'll never find the b value, okay? So there's no way like we just look off the graph and say b is this. You have to look off the graph, get the period, fill it into a formula, and get b. What's the formula? On your formula sheet. It's p equals 2 pi over b. So tomorrow when we go over equations, and I want the period from an equation, you're going to plug the b value from your equation in and get p, right? But what if I want b and they gave me p? Well, I can bring this b up and I can divide the p down. So basically they just swap spots, right? Bring the b up and multiply it, bring the p down and divide it. So b equals 2 pi over p. So you need to know the period in order to find b. If you know the period, you fill it in, get your answer, you have your b, okay? What is the period? Well, the period of the graph is how long it takes till it repeats itself. The graph takes horizontally until it repeats itself. Some easy ways to find this is from a max to a max. So how far horizontally it takes to get from a max to a max, because once you hit a max, back to a max again, now you're repeating yourself, okay? Or from a min to a min. Because if I go from a minimum past a max back to a minimum, I'm going to repeat myself again. Right? So from a min to a min is one period. From a max to a max is one period, because if I keep going, it's going to look the same again, right? I just keep repeating. Those are the easiest way, but sometimes they don't give you a horizontal value from a max to a max, so you can't like calculate them because they're in between values, so you're not going to get something accurate. Or from a min to a min, you're not going to get something accurate. Okay? So sometimes these are not guarantee ways. I always check those ones. Sometimes you go from the x-axis till it repeats itself again. That's one that most people choose. Okay, so we're going to go to our first page. Once we get the period of the graph, we can fill it into 2 pi over period and we get our b value. So, for example, if I went from a max to a max here, both my maxes are not a nice, like they're not labeled at the horizontally, so that's really hard to find. Min to min isn't labeled horizontally. So what I like trying first is from the x-axis, past a max, past a min, or past a min, past a max, depending on which way the graph's going, back to that same value. So if I travel up here, I haven't repeated myself yet, have I? Some people say, well, now I am. No, you're not. You're on your way down. Then I'm past a min. Then I come up to back up to here, and then I have to stop, because what's going to happen now? I'm going to start repeating. And I want to know the distance that this graph takes till it starts repeating itself again, the horizontal distance. So if I start here, I go past a max, past a min, back to here. I haven't repeated myself yet. But if I start going back up here now, what's going to happen? I look exactly the same as this, which is a problem. I can't count that. That's out. So how far horizontally is that? We're from 0 to, what's this value? Nope, look on your sheet. Pi. It just looks like an X because I crossed out. It's from 0 to pi. So the period of this graph is pi. So what's my b value? My b is 2 pi divided by p. So it's 2 pi divided by pi. So it's 2. Now that I have that, I have my equation. This original equation is in y equals a sine bx plus d. Why would I write it like this? Because there's no c. So they'll give it to you like this. They'll say, what's the equation of this graph in this form? There's no c because there's no c. C is 0. There's no horizontal shift. So now I can fill it in. Y equals 3 sine b is 2x. D is 0. So do I have to go plus 0 at the back? No, I can leave it off. Now there's a catch. Your amplitude has to be positive, but your A value could be positive or negative. How do we know which one? Well, I'm going to leave it as a positive for now, and then I'm going to plug it into my calculator and see if I get the same graph. How do I compare graphs? How have I told you guys this before? If you have an equation, how do you compare it to a graph that you were given? What's the best way to compare? Same windows. You have to do same windows. This window is radians, correct? So we have to go to our mode and make sure it's in radians. So that's the first thing you need to do. Go to your mode and make sure it's in radians, because you're going to touch the sign button. The moment you go to hit the sign button, you stop yourself and you say, hey, I'm going to hit the sign button. If I'm hitting the sign button, I need to check my mode. Okay? My x-axis is in radians, so my mode is going to be in radians. So make sure your calculator is in radians. Is it? Okay, next thing you're going to do, make your window the same. So go to your window. My x min, this one looks like pi, negative pi over 2. This one goes to 3 pi over 2. So I'm going to put this one to negative 3 pi over 2, just because they look symmetrical. So go negative 3 pi over 2 in your x min. So you're literally going to type negative 3 pi. What is over? Division. That's a division symbol. Some people are like, I don't know what over is. Over is a division symbol. Fractions are just a division, right? Negative 3 pi divided by 2 is your x min. Your x max is, for all of you who are not typing this in your calculator, I'm really good at this, but I'm not writing your test for you. So you need to type it into your calculator. Y max would be 3 pi over 2. So your x max, I'm saying y max. Your x max is 3 pi divided by 2. We agree? Does the scale really matter? Should you spend numerous hours trying to figure out that the scale is actually pi over 2, which is what it says? Should you spend hours and hours and hours and hours doing that? No, don't. The scale doesn't matter. Remember the scale? The scale matters so that you can see it accurately, but if you're going to sit there and that's where you're going to waste your time on a test coming up with the scale, please don't. The scale is actually pi over 2 because it's going, each tick is going up by pi over 2. But if you were stuck, leave it as 1. It's not going to kill you, okay? It will look horrible, but like the little ticks, but that ain't the worst thing in the world. Now, your y min is negative 3. Your y max is positive 3. Your y min is negative 3. Your y max is positive 3. Now we have our window set. We have our mode correct. Now we can go into our y equals and type in the equation. So type in y equals 3 sine 2x in brackets. Close it. Press graph. If your graph looks exactly the same as this but reflected, so if it looked like this instead, it was like going down and then back up and then back down and then back up, say it was going the wrong way, like it looks the exact same but reflected the wrong way, then you need to change this to a negative 3 and you'd have the correct one. You can tell. That is the easiest way for me to explain to you how to make this a positive or negative. I put it in as a positive, and if it's the wrong way, like it's going down instead of going up right away, make it a negative and it'll fix it. That's it. You've seen, you know you're right, you move on to the next question, you're a happy person. No. I'm just asking you to find. So from this particular question on the diploma, I could give you this question right here, and I can ask you so many things about it if I wanted to. I could ask you for the amplitude. I could ask you for the period, just giving me the period. I could ask you to find the midline. I could ask you to give me the equation, right? All those things. I could, if they give you the, they could ask you something about it after that too, but most of the time that's a word problem. They give you the equation and you fill it in, or you get a sinusoidal regression. Or, well, they make you kind of, yeah. Okay, what's the period of this graph? I'm going to start on the x-axis. Okay, what's the period of this graph? So if we go from on the x-axis, it's actually at a minimum. We'll go back to a minimum. And when did it repeat itself? 6. So the period, this graph repeats itself every 6. So b equals 2 pi divided by p. So it's going to be 2 pi divided by 6. And you're going to get pi over 3. So what would my equation be? Y equals a sine b x. You don't know this, but this graph actually has been shifted 1.5 to the right, which is, you're like, what? It doesn't matter because I have to tell you that. So I'm going to go x minus 1.5 plus d. You're just happy that's there. You didn't have to find it. Be grateful. It's not that fun. So they're going to say, determine the equation of this graph in the form y equals a sine b x minus 1.5 plus d. All you're going to do is write x minus 1.5. You're not going to do anything to that. You're going to fill in your a, you're going to fill in your b, you're going to fill in your d. So the a was 4 sine. B is pi over 3. X minus 1.5 plus 2. So we're just going to fill it in like that. So what do I want you to do? I want you to find the period of, not this one, that was a hard one to find. Let me get you to flip to the next page. I will come back to those. Don't worry, we'll come back to those. I want you to find the period and the equation for 4, 5, and 6. Now, the equation for 4, 5, and 6 are all this. Y equals a sine bx plus d. They're all not shifted. So I want you to find 4, 5, and 6, the period and the equation. Then flip over. So 4, 5, and 6, I want you to find the period and the equation. Then flip over. This is your homework in this booklet. I want you to do A and B and C. Now look, please. Look it. They gave you the form. They gave you a different C value. If you don't put this pi in, you're not going to get this equation, right? So you still find your A and your B and your D like normal. But remember, you have to fill it into that formula. Okay? Same thing here. Do number 9. Number 10 and number 11. 8, 9, 10, and 11. All for homework.